Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Just kidding, I've always wanted to say that in a video, but anyway, this is Brittany, and today I'm going to be talking about the art of protest. I'm going to be specifically talking about the Black Panther movement using buttons from the archive. So protests with the use of art have been significantly prevalent during the 1960s civil rights movement, and famous Black Panther Minister of Culture named Emory Douglas, Professor Oken went over him in her last art lecture, has said his art is used, and I quote, to illustrate conditions that made revolution a reasonable response and to construct visual mythology of power for people who felt powerless and victimized. And I believe that this can be said of all protest art depicted during the Black Panther movement. These are the Black Panther Party buttons from the archive. They were distributed at rallies and other events in the mid to late 1960s and successfully impacted and captured the spread of the rhetoric of freedom, identity, and power promoted by the Black Panther Party members and their allies in the fight for civil and human rights. Many of the buttons advertised by the Black Panther movement contain symbols and words that imply freedom. For example, the phrases "Free Huey" and "Free Bobby," who were prominent leaders of the movement, made a powerful statement. Free Huey was trending on these buttons after Huey Newton was accused of murdering an Oakland policeman in 1968. He was found guilty even though evidence was obviously tampered with. This phrase of "free so-and-so" is still popularized and seen today in hashtags on social media such as Twitter and Instagram. Symbols of pigs were also used to represent policemen. People against the movement undermined it by claiming that the pigs were racist portrayals of white policemen. Ironically, these policemen were unjustly arresting African Americans at an abnormally high rate. As seen in this graph, African Americans are the largest group to have been incarcerated in the 1960s, and they're actually incarcerated at an even higher rate today despite making up only about 14% of the US population. These buttons also gave an individual identity for figures involved in the movement as well as an identity for Black Americans themselves. This button of Robert Houghton is actually one of my favorites. It's labeled "Youth Makes the Revolution." It was made by high school students at a conference in San Francisco to protest racism in schools, as well as protest the Vietnam War. Houghton was the first recruit of the Black Panther movement at the age of just 16 years old, and he became the party treasurer later on. This button was truly inspiring to me because I believe that we're the generation to change the world with our progressive ideals. Many of the buttons also contain the colors of red, black, and green, symbolizing African American nationalism. These buttons ultimately gave Black Americans a sense of identity that united them. Images and phrases are also depicted in the buttons that represent the concept of power. Guns were a symbol of the power of threatened resistance from police brutality. The guns were seen as tools and methods for liberation, as seen in the button titled "Political Prisoners of USA Fascism," depicting Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. These buttons ultimately conveyed visible images of strength. They also depicted ideas of Western culture, which included strong, handsome, well-dressed men, except they were strong, handsome, well-dressed Black men, which contradicted the stereotypes that white Americans placed on African Americans. The buttons also used phrases of empowerment such as "Black Power," and Martin Luther King has said that this phrase is an emotional concept that means different things to different people. He believed the phrase incited violence at first, but then he later claimed that it was a reaction against white power. He explained that white Americans didn't deliver their promises, so the phrase was essentially a cry of pain. Without these buttons and moving artwork that scream liberty while depicting individuals and their power, the Black Panther movement might not have been as successful and widespread as it was. The fight is still not over. African Americans as well as other minorities continue to fight for the equity they deserve today. Thank you. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe.